Welcome to this video on the Vox Virtual Data Centre, or VDC for short. In this video, I'm going to go through some of the features and benefits that you can expect if you take our Virtual Data Centre offering. This is the screen that you log into in the portal. It gives you an overview of what you have in your Virtual Data Centre. In this particular case, there are two virtual data centres, JB1 and JB2. This means that you as a customer can have two virtual data centers in two physically separate locations. Both of these VDCs are hosted physically separate, which means that you can have a high level of redundancy between your data centers. You can replicate these two environments to give you that high availability that companies need. On the screen, it'll show you what resources you have available in each of the VDCs, your CPU, your memory, your storage. It also shows you how many VApps you have, which I'll touch on in a minute, and how many virtual machines you're running in each data center. Let me click into the data center itself. As you can see here, you have the virtual machines that are available in that data center. There's 3 in this case. What it gives you is the ability to see that the virtual machine is powered on. It would indicate powered off if it was powered off, or suspended if it was suspended. There's also the option to click VM console. This gives you an insight into exactly what's happening. It's as if you're sitting in front of the server, and it's very useful if you need to, for example, set up a network configuration, or maybe you've had an issue with a blue screen on a Windows machine that you need to resolve. You'll be able to go into the screen and resolve it, or you can just use it on a day-to-day basis to manage your virtual machines. On the screen, there is more information. There's the compute resources, storage, and memory for each of the virtual machines. And then under the Actions options, there are a number of other features that are useful. You can power off your virtual machine. This would be the equivalent of pulling the power out. Obviously not recommended, but possible if your server is hanging severely. There's also Shutdown Guest OS. This is a graceful shutdown, as if you were in the operating system and pressed Start to shut down. Obviously, that's the preferred way of shutting your virtual machine down. Then we've got Reset, which is the equivalent of pressing the reset button on the physical server. Also not generally recommended, but it's sometimes necessary. And then you can also suspend your server, so if you want to pause the server, you can hit suspend. You can also copy or move your VMs into various VApps and various other places through this option here. You can also create a snapshot, so if you're doing a software upgrade and you want to make sure that if there's an issue you can roll back, that's where the snapshot comes in. And you'll see grayed out below that once you have a snapshot, you can then revert to that snapshot. You can also insert media. So if you need a piece of software loaded and you've got it on an ISO or some sort of media, you can insert the media. It will then show up in the server as a disk, and you can then load it as you need. Obviously, that's quite useful if you're loading the operating system from scratch, although there are other ways to load the operating systems. You can now obviously eject the media, and then you have the option to install VMware tools. This is quite important if you want the functionality of things like the graceful shutdown. That gets driven out of the VMware tools. Next up are VApps. A VApp is a logical collection of servers that make up one particular task or application. In the traditional sense, you could have a 3-tier application front-end, application middleware, and then the database all in one VApp. It allows you to then start that VApp through those virtual machines together or on a schedule. So you could start your database first, and then the middleware, and then the front end. But it gives you a logical grouping to manage those applications. Once again, it gives you some of the core metrics like the CPU, the storage, and the memory. And there's options then to start the power off or stop your application as you need to. Next up, networking. The networking in the VDC works very similarly to the networking within a physical data center. There are networks with IP ranges and the like. In this particular case, this top network is the external address, so it's the external range. If you have VDC from Vox, you get 5 usable public IP addresses with the VDC, and that's how you would connect into your data center from the outside. Then you have some internal addresses here. In this case, there's 2. You can have as many as you like, depending on your network architecture, and they would be the internal network ranges. Next up is the virtual machine edges. So this is, as the name implies, the edge of the network or the edge of the data center, and very much functions like the firewall for the data center. For those of you who have worked on firewalls, this should look very familiar. You have a set of rules along with destination services, sources, and actions, and you can set this up exactly as you require. You can also then enable logging if you want some more detail of what's going through the firewall. And once again, you can create as many firewall rules as you need to configure the network exactly as you need it. There's also the ability to have naturals. You can have a variety of different naturals set up. There's also a routing engine that allows different routing configurations. There's a load balancer. So if you've got two applications and you want to send traffic into both of those applications to load balance, you can do that with a load balancer. Lastly, there's the VPN client or server. This allows you to create site-to-site VPNs between any sort of device. Being a FortiGate Platinum partner, we often connect this to FortiGate firewalls at a customer site, but it can connect into any firewall or network device that supports IPsec VPN. Across the top here, you've got data centers and you've also got an Applications tab that allows you to see your different applications across both VDCs or a single VDC, depending on your configuration. You can then have a look here and see the different applications. Libraries has a number of different templates loaded that you can install to make your life easier when you create servers. In this case, these templates are actually configured to set up exactly what you need in the environment to run something like Grafana or Jenkins or Joomla, depending on your requirements. It's very popular with the DevOps community, and you'll see most of these are focused on DevOps or web design. There's MySQL, there's WordPress, there's Joomla, there's a whole bunch of different templates. There's also templates for things like Windows Server, standard Linux distributions, Ubuntu, and CentOS, and you can load those as templates. The difference between a template and an ISO image is that the template already has a number of components pre-configured, so it's just easier to use. You can also then create a VM from a media set. So there's a set of media ISOs that are already loaded here. Windows Server 2016, 2019, there's Ubuntu, there's CentOS, there's Red Hat, and you can use that as an ISO in your server to load up the operating system from scratch. Under administration, there are a number of different users and roles that you can create. You can create different sets of user credentials for your staff, and then you can create a role depending on what the staff needs to do. So for example, you can have a role that only allows console access, just so that the user can go onto the console on the server, but they can't create new VMs or stop and start the VM. And then obviously the organization administrator has full access to the whole system. Under Monitor, we have the ability to see what's happened in the environment, completely listed here. It's a very useful tool, especially when you're conducting an audit to quickly identify changes or events in your environment. Under More, there are a couple of other options that I'd like to highlight. One is the App Launchpad. This is very similar to the templates that I touched on earlier. It's a pre-configured set of templates that you can load up so that you can use them in applications. So there's, for example, a Grafana virtual appliance, Jenkins, Joomla, MySQL, MongoDB, all of those sort of things that you've got listed here. You can just launch them from here and they'll create the right set of virtual machines in your data center to be able to use them. And that is the Virtual Data Center in a nutshell. Thank you.